To many, Winston Churchill stands as an emblem of British pride, with his force of personality and rousing speeches.
Men will still say, this was their finest hour.
In the Anglo-American world, Churchill is seen as a hero. He made the right call in the 1930s to warn against the dangers of the Nazis.
To galvanise the British nation, to inspire it to stand up against Hitler.
And as one convoy returns, another is going over to take its place.
But others say he was racist, a staunch British imperialist. Some hold him responsible for violence and a horrifying famine in India.
Around other parts of the world, he is often seen in a very negative light.
One criticism that's often aimed at Churchill is that he was racist.
Churchill was quite explicit that he did believe that white people were superior. He said that he disliked Chinese people. He described Indians as a beastly people with a beastly religion, by which he meant Hinduism. He often described Africans as being sort of childlike. He was certainly criticised during his own lifetime for having outdated, antiquated views on race.
So did he hold these views throughout his lifetime?
Churchill was not a politician who stuck rigidly forever to a certain worldview. Events did lead to him changing his mind. And it is quite evident that during the war, when everyone had to kind of get together to try and defeat the Nazis and the Japanese, he certainly did change his mind about white supremacy. And he is quoted on various occasions as saying that we can no longer see the white man as superior.
As well as being a fierce opponent of Gandhi and Indian independence, many Indians hold Churchill responsible for the Bengal famine of World War II, where 3 million people died. Wartime food shortages led to a mass starvation in British-administered Bengal. Prime Minister Churchill was accused of stockpiling food ready to feed liberated European prisoners, bypassing India.
We know that he made very negative comments about Indians and blamed them really for the famine, saying it was their fault for breeding like rabbits. But that's not to say that he deliberately planned or engineered the famine or wanted to perpetrate deliberate genocide against Indians.
He was very much constrained by the emergency of war and all the other demands on his time and thought, and also most particularly shipping, which was an absolutely huge shortage at the time.
In 1910, miners in the Welsh town of Tonypandy went on strike following a dispute with mine owners. After they clashed with police, Churchill, who was then Home Secretary, sent in the army. This was seen as an overreaction by many in Wales, with some claiming that the army fired shots, but this has never been verified.
Churchill was criticised at the time by the Daily Mail for being too soft. Later, of course, this episode was seen as him being very harsh towards the working classes. There were exaggerated stories of him sending troops to shoot down Welsh miners, which were not true.
Churchill gained a reputation as an anti-union politician, but some historians dispute this.
He was very much one of the two major architects of the foundations of the welfare state with Lloyd George. So we have to thank Churchill for the statutory tea break and all sorts of other elements.
He helped pioneer the system of labour exchanges, what we would now call job centres. He was somebody who was perceived by Conservatives as being a sort of a class traitor, a rabble-rouser, in fact.
And there was one place in particular where Churchill gained a reputation for enabling violence. The Irish War of Independence began in 1919 when Churchill was Secretary of State for War.
He advocated and supported the formation of a group of auxiliary forces called the Black and Tans, who were responsible for brutal reprisals against Irish rebels who were fighting Britain, burning down people's houses and so on and so forth. Churchill certainly knew what was going on. He, of course, regarded this as a war. He saw this as vital to the survival of the British Empire.
So was Churchill anti-Irish? It may not be that simple.
He subsequently changed his tune and played a key important role in negotiating the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921, which gave birth to the so-called Irish Free State, which later became the Irish Republic.
And before he died, Michael Collins said that nothing could have been achieved in setting up the Irish Free State and establishing the Irish Treaty of 1921 without Churchill, and certainly not the implementation of it.
So, Winston Churchill, hero or villain?
It's a silly question.
I wish people would stop asking simplistic questions as to whether or not Churchill is a hero or a villain.
What people want to do is attribute far too much power to one single person. History is far more complicated than that.
He is the most biographed person in history because he's a little bit of both. We still always eventually come back to what he achieved in 1940, 1941, 1942, which was to stand up against Hitler, when pretty much no one else was doing that in Europe at the time.
He was a controversial figure during his own lifetime, both in Britain and around the world, and that has persisted until the present day.